What I'd like to do today is just two slides. One slide talking about chastity, and another one talking about modesty and shame. And my goal is always to give this to you differently than you've heard it in the past. So I hope that happens. We will see. Once again, I'm pulling this material from Caro Wojtyła, Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, his book, Love and Responsibility. So let me just start before we, answer the second one here.
Hold on.
And let me ask you, when you hear the term chastity, what do you think of? Like, what do you think that means? Yeah. Abstinence.
When you don't have sex until you're married.
No sex until you're married, is that what you say? Yeah.
I just think of the chastity belt.
Chastity. Well, it's funny because that's what I thought of when I was younger. I thought of the, these belts that so-called young women were to wear, at least young women of nobility, so that their purity could be intact. Okay, all that's wrong, but I didn't know that either. There wasn't a lot of good catechesis going on when I was young. So chastity, I'll give you the definition and then I'll say why it was wrong. Chastity defined is right-ordered love. Okay, it's right-ordered love. So no matter what your state is in life, it's how you properly and rightly order love according to that state. So, I'm married. I'm chaste. Father Gene is celibate. He's chaste. You are unmarried, not intending to be celibate when you are, so you have to be chaste. So what that means is that we found a way to integrate love and sexuality no matter where we're at. Now why is that so important? Because growing up, I heard abstinence. We didn't hear the word chastity. We heard just don't have sex wait until you're married. If sex before married, it's sin. It's bad. But when you get married, then it's not. Okay. As a young person, that made no sense to me. What in God's name happens at your marriage on that day that makes it go from bad to good? And how do I bring what I didn't have before I'm married into what now I don't know about that I am married? Okay. So what chastity does is chastity is like I have to find, like when I was single, I had to find a way to integrate my love and sexuality into my single life. When I got married, now I just have to integrate it into my married life. There wasn't a big change because I was already practicing the love and integration. I just had to change how it was being integrated. So I was able to bring chastity into marriage. You can't bring abstinence into marriage. That would be abnormal. Okay. So a lot of this is simple. It's evident. It's psychological truths, but let's talk about it. Sexual or emotional reactions to a person develop more quickly than the virtue, of love, right? They develop more quickly. And in many ways, that's expected. When I first saw my wife, I really, honest to God, I thought she was so beautiful, all right? So whatever urges came up immediately is quite natural. It would kind of be weird if it didn't, right? We don't walk around like bricks, just unresponsive to those people that are in our proximity. But we have to find a way to integrate that, right? So you're going to see people, and you've already done it, right? I mean, it's a great feeling when you see somebody and they kind of take the wind out of you. It's like you almost can't stop staring because you're thinking, I can't believe this. Look at this. And by the way, we'll talk, if we go over love and intimacy, we'll talk about that's not just a physical thing you're seeing. There's probably other things that we sense. But nonetheless, that's a good thing. But how do we react to it is a different situation, okay? So we have to watch, because these sensual emotions, which are very natural, very good, they develop very quickly. It takes a little bit longer for the love to kick in. So if you remember, when we talked about concupiscence, I think both in the sacraments and probably earlier in the morality course, remember how I said I didn't like the definition, a tendency to sin? Because that doesn't really tell me what's going on. Remember I said concupiscence is a disorder between my reason and my appetites, my desires, right? So I have desires, not just sexual desires for food and other things, right? But we're talking here more or less with sexuality. So we all have these sexual desires. It's natural because we're human, right? So if you're married and you're very much in love with your spouse, say like it's a guy like me, and you're still attracted to other women, that's not disordered. That's quite natural, because you don't stop having that attraction. But concupiscence is to see a person through the prism of sexuality. Okay? It sees the person through a prism of sexuality alone. They become an object of enjoyment. Okay? So concupiscence is a tendency to see the person through the lens of sexuality alone, and they become an object of enjoyment. So no longer am I seeing that individual as a person who's worthy of respect. I'm seeing them in terms of how can they bring me pleasure. Okay. Now, this is obvious. And I know sometimes this sounds sexist. I don't want it to be. But, when we talk about objectifying the other sex, I don't really know of situations where men have felt objectified by women. All right? But almost all the situations I know, women have been objectified by men. Now, I know that sounds sexist, but it's my experience. You go to when you're in college, you guys are going to be able to go to, when you hit 21, you go to bars and dance clubs and frat parties. I don't know if it's still like this, but when I was in college, men had to pay. Women got in free. Why? Because they knew if they filled their bar with women, the guys would go out, they'd pay to go in. What is the guy going up there? Well, it's a pickup bar, right? So you're going there to look for other people. You're going to be sexually attracted to them, all right? But you're objectifying them. So somebody might say, well, why do girls go there? Well, maybe they want to get picked up by a guy. And then we start the conversation, well, then what's wrong with that? Okay, then you're going to have to think back to last week when I said you can never abdicate this, subjectivity that you have. You cannot be treated like an object. Even, two people having pleasure together sounds right. It sounds almost like mutual, it never called it mutual egoism. But that's still not right. It's objectifying the other individual, right? So we have to watch it. That's the weakness with concupiscence in terms of sexuality. Bless you.
Yeah.
Now, we cannot have an asexual desire. Let's not, and I'll talk to you later about what it means to be approved. For somebody to say, I love my wife so much, I would never in a million years look at another woman as attractive. I mean, there'd be something abnormal with me. I mean, we do not have that ability, all right? Which is what I wish somebody would have told me when I was young. That I had it in my head that when I would be married, then attraction to other people will just go away. Why? Because I have somebody now, and this person, it's okay for me to have sex with them. So all the other ones will no longer be desirable. It's the biggest lie out there if anybody buys into it, which is why chastity is so important. Because that attraction will never go away. And if you ever go and talk to people who've been in nursing homes, as people towards the end of their lives start to lose their filter, you'll hear sexual things from 90-year-olds. They haven't lost a bit of it. They're in their mind, which is something else I never realized. No matter how old you get in your mind, you're still young. So, for a 90-year-old to think sexually is nothing. They're still sexual beings. So we're not asexual. I mean, that's just the reality. It's a value, we would say. Let me see where the desire, okay. It's a value correctly integrated, well, let's just say with love of the person. That's the easiest way to end that. The desire is not asexual. It's a value correctly integrated with the love of the person. So if I'm married and still find other women sexually attractive, love has to take over. Love has to regulate that. That's right-ordered love. I need chastity in this relationship for me to properly order these things. Nobody loses in this situation, by the way. This takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of strength. What we have to watch, and this is like, the devil in the details type of thing, is something that's called emotional subjectivism. Whatever is connected with a genuine emotion, it seems authentic, right? Whatever is connected with a genuine emotion, it seems authentic. So you may see somebody and fall immediately in love, even though we know it's not love. we are attracted to them. It's a type of love, right? Like we might talk about eros. Eros is not a bad thing, right? Eros is this attractiveness that we have toward each other, and it doesn't have to be sexual, okay? And this level of intimacy that we want, right? Remember I told you, I have to find ways to be intimate with you, teacher to student. But as you understand intimacy as a relation, not as something that's been hypersexualized. So whatever's connected with genuine emotion, it seems to be authentic. So two young people who are just head over heels with each other, it seems so natural. Why does not the sexual relation flow from this? Because it seems to be vindicated by the fact that we have this real, what we have between us is real. It's heightened emotion, that is real. But it's not there to love. Love and reason come in to regulate that. And at some point, it kicks in and says, I can't objectify this person. I cannot have pleasure at their expense. But what if she has a mind? What if we're both having pleasure together? Now you have mutual egoism. Right? Now you have mutual egoism. Which brings us to the next point. Now, I guess it's one below this. This is just a reiteration on what I said. Sexual reactions must be subordinated to reason. This is the fruit of moderation. Okay? This is done by moderation. Let's say it that way. Sexual reactions must be subordinated to reason. This is done by moderation. The virtue of moderation, temperance. Maybe you have a sweet tooth. Maybe you like buffalo chicken dip. You can't just eat the whole thing. You might want to. You might even feel like doing it. Maybe sometimes you do. Right? You go on a binge. So what happens is that you have this urge, right, to do it. Reason has to kick in. So reason tells you, no, this is not good for me. The same thing with sexual attraction. It's real and it's a good thing. But reason's going to have to kick in. And you need the virtue of temperance to help moderate that. Which, again, virtues are something that are practiced. The more we practice it, the better we get. Which is why you might hear things about guys avoiding what we would call the near occasion of sin. Because, having too many friends that are girls and spending too many times with women that are not, nothing wrong with spending time with women, but you could get yourself in a habit where you're lowering the threshold. It might be easy for you to fall into, something that's not right. A lot of times companies will send people out, offices out on, certain conventions and stuff. So there you are. You might be away, who would know, or another city. I mean, you're putting yourself in a situation where something bad can happen easier than wouldn't happen in other situations. And this is the danger in the whole thing. The more successfully that this utilitarian attitude, a utilitarian attitude is, I will use you as a means to an end. You will use somebody else for pleasure. The more that it is camouflaged, the more that we don't really see it for what it is, the more successfully the utilitarian attitude is camouflaged, the more dangerous it is. The more dangerous it is. So when two young people who become sexually active, they can camouflage what is really just two people using each other for pleasure. They'll camouflage it as an expression of love. Which then, because it's an expression of love, up here, like when I said whatever's connected to genuine emotion seems authentic, it seems so real. Why would we not want to do this with each other? This is what lovers do. All we've done is fool ourselves. We can fool ourselves very easily. It doesn't take much. And when you have all of this emotion and good attraction behind it, and not enough discipline or or the virtue of temperance to moderate it, it's setting ourselves up for a habit. Then what happens? Once a couple starts living together, and then they're presented with what the church is teaching on marriage, you're in a conundrum. You know that you're outside of, I'm a Catholic, but yet I'm doing this. So you either accommodate yourself by saying, well, they're wrong on that point, or you're going to have to say, they're right on that point, and I have to change my behavior. People typically will not change their behavior, they'll change what they think. So I'll look for a church that doesn't really talk about this as much, right? because we always want to try to preserve our way of thinking. We think that it's against our freedom to conform to some other teaching. You have to go back and remember the difference between law and freedom. Okay? So then to be chaste means that you would simply have a transparent attitude. Without which love cannot be itself. Okay, and I'll explain what that means. To be chaste means to have a transparent attitude without which love cannot be itself. So rather than camouflaging these or deceiving ourselves or deceiving somebody else, come on, baby, I thought you loved me. Why wouldn't you do this? Don't you want to show me you love me? Any talk like that, right? So rather than this camouflaging that as love, if we make it transparent, love will reveal we don't objectify each other at this point. You know? Any questions? All right, let's do the last slide. This slide, too, comes from love responsibility. So we're going to have to talk about what shame is. And hopefully we can get these slides done and just have some conversation. That would really be great. First period, not so much. Last period, we spent the last 5 or 6 minutes just having a conversation. It is superficial to say that shame is simply a tendency to conceal. Okay? It's superficial to say that shame is a tendency to conceal. So what happens when you are ashamed? What do we do? Like, if I wanted to communicate to you that I'm ashamed, like if I said something really stupid up here and you caught me, you hide your eyes. Like I was on a forum the other day, and I meant to say dual degree, but I spelled dual D-U-E-L. I didn't realize that until somebody said, well, that'd be fun too if we had a shooting degree. So you say something that, that's just, it's a silly mistype, but nonetheless, when we say something shameful, we want to hide our eyes, we bury our heads in our desk. So that might give us the idea that to be shameful of something means I want to conceal it. That would be superficial. Okay? Shame does not conceal what is bad. There is nothing shameful about your or my bodies. We don't wear clothes because we are concealing something that's bad. That's not why we wear clothes. Even on the beach. I mean, even if girls, just went down to a two-piece, they're not concealing something that is bad. Okay? But when something that is private, they should not cross the boundary into public. Okay? There's something private about my person that should never cross the boundary that goes into the public sphere. That's where shame kicks in. Okay? So next week, maybe we'll talk about so-called theology of the body, or I call it nuptial mystery, where we read in Genesis, Adam and Eve were naked without shame. What did that mean? There was nothing that they needed between the two that they needed to conceal. Why? Because I'll teach you terms like an interior gaze. The man and woman were not objectifying each other. After they ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge and evil, what was the first thing they did? Fig leaves to cover the parts that are more private to my person. And God himself fashioned an apron for them. Now, I don't ever want to be thought of as sexist when I talk about the difference between men and women. I just believe there are differences between men and women, and I don't boil it down to stereotypes. But you don't have to nod your heads or anything, but maybe you'll agree. Women understand that better than men. If you tell, I can't even conceive of a situation where a man will be talking to a woman and he has to say, my eyes are up here. A girl already knows what that means. A girl already knows what it means, he looked me in the eyes. She already knows what that means intuitively. A guy, no clue. I mean, so there are certain differences, right? So we have to make sure that we're saying shame, there's nothing bad about this. We do not want something that is private to cross the boundary into the public sphere. Now, that being said, I don't want to give the impression that sexual modesty can simply be defined with clothing. And I'll say that's secondary, okay? Clothing is secondary for us, although it's still important. So we'll have to talk about what does that mean in terms of modesty too. Sexual modesty cannot simply be identified with clothing. That is secondary. It's an interior attitude that we are protecting, okay? It's the idea that I do not want to be objectified as a person. Look at me as a subject, not as an object, right? Now that transponds beyond sexuality. After clothing, yeah, that's secondary. You know, clothing, you know, identifying with clothing is just secondary. Really, in the end, we'll say this. Modesty is a self-defense against a person being an object of enjoyment. Okay? Being an object of enjoyment. Young men and women are not asked to dress modestly because there's something bad that they need to cover. A person should dress modestly just as a self-defense from being objectified. I don't wish to be looked at as a sexual object, right? And then we'll talk about how that plays out. Against a person being an object of enjoyment. So what we say then is modesty reveals the value of the person. So what modesty does is it says to you and whoever it is that you are, you know, in a good way, emotionally, even find them sexually attractive, love kicks in, integrates that, and says, no, rightly order that. The other person is dressed in a way that says, I want you to love me as a person first. Okay? These clothes are not concealing something that is bad or that I should be ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of my body. It's just that my body is something that is private and it's not for public consumption. When we are married, we will see, then shame becomes absorbed. So there's no place for that in marriage because the covenant is put in place to protect each other, even though you still can't objectify each other. It's to protect each other from being objectified. So what is held as private in the individual develops into a shared value of the persons. It develops into a shared value of the persons. So me and my wife no longer have to protect ourselves to keep back what is private, which now is a shared, by love is integrated it within our marriage and now becomes a shared value. So now, ideally, we can regain what Adam and Eve had in the beginning. And we look at each other in an interior glaze, no longer as an object for my enjoyment, because you still can use somebody within marriage. Now, if this all sounds somewhat corny to you, I'm not saying you think that, in the end, I really think the woman is the one that wins out of this. Because, I don't ever want to sound sexist, but I think she is much more likely to be objectified than the male, right? So for a woman to say that, you know, I mean, I will never see you other than anything than as a person deserving of love and value of my respect. Okay. I'm thinking that'd be something a young girl would want to hear. In other words, I will preserve your respect. I do not want, you don't need to worry about me objectifying you. I mean, and then a person really tries that way, but we get caught in the emotions, right? Then the emotions, the sexual attraction seems so real and authentic, it seems like it's natural to express it. And we're not being honest or transparent with ourselves to saying, it's really mutual egoism. We're really just enjoying pleasure with each other, all right? So shame is the natural way of avoiding the utilitarian attitude it loses its reason for existence. Shame is the natural way of avoiding the utilitarian attitude, and shame loses its reason for existence. So in my marriage, ideally, there should be no shame. I need to integrate love, which I learned as a young person in chastity, now in my marriage, I still cannot objectify this person simply because she's mine, that kind of thing, right? This is the last one. Then don't put your stuff away. I want to talk. This is not about being a prude, okay? The Catholic Church has a very vibrant understanding of sexuality. And I'll say something about that in a minute. Prudery, or being prude, really consists in concealing one's real intentions in matters of sexuality. Being a prude really consists in concealing one's intentions in matters of sexuality. If somebody were to say, I refuse to, that I will never look at another woman, my wife is the only one for me, she's the one I profess my love to, nobody else I find attractive, you're a prude. And you're concealing your real intentions, because that's not how it works in life, right? Okay, so let me talk about this in the last 5 minutes or so. What did I want to say? All right.
You're not thinking about it.
I'm sorry, Renee, what?
You're not thinking about it.
No, I'm going to leave it up. You know, okay. I saw some conversations on Facebook, people that graduated and such. I don't know if the story's real. You never know if the story's real, but it's not important for this. I guess at some high school, a male teacher had written up a girl for not wearing a bra in class. And some of the people were commenting, why was that old guy so-called checking out this young girl? Well, the problem with this is, and this is where I think young people miss it, right? I mean, young people dress in a way that's attractive because they want other people their age to look at them. But we don't have a sign or a filter that says, if you're 5 years older than me, you're not allowed to look at me. It's not how it works. So, if a girl and I know I'm not trying to pick on girls because, I'll take any suggestions. I don't know how a guy can dress seductively, when he goes out. I don't know what that is right now. I have to think more about it. But if a girl dresses, and let's say some girls like to look sexy, and you go out, and if there's a 60-some-year-old guy checking you out, how do you stop that? Well, you don't. Because, see, modesty is gone. So whether it's intentional or not, and I get the pressures, right? Sometimes it's hard to find the clothing. It's hard to find, how else do I dress? But the reality is that the immodesty sets a person up to be objectified. Now, before you do think that I'm sexist, let me say it this way. And actually, I didn't want to show the video, but I'm repeating two feminists from the 70s who are still obviously still very active now. One's married and one's a lesbian. Both are just talking about exactly what I'm saying here. I'm just using a different analogy. Let's say that you have a car, and in your car you leave $25 bills on the front seat, and you don't lock the car. Okay. Are you asking to be robbed? Not really. You didn't put a sign up that said there's money in here, steal it. You're not asking to be robbed. Should you have expected that it happened? Well, you probably should have thought that it was a possibility. Did you deserve to be robbed? Absolutely not. Just because the door is unlocked and you had money in there doesn't mean you deserved it. So we have to kind of apply the same thing to our dress. We have to watch saying it's the woman's fault, because it's not. The guy has a responsibility too. The person who robbed had a responsibility not to take what was not his, which is in a sense what modesty stops you from doing. It does, that's a good way to say it. It stops the man from taking what is not his. Your objectivity. That is not his to take, right? So we have to find a balance, right? Even if you did lock the doors, and even if the money wasn't exposed, yes, somebody could smash the window just to see if there's anything of value in there. I get that, okay? But we have to watch it. We already find it difficult. So we find it difficult to talk about the differences between the sexes, because we don't want to ever say that one is better than the other. But on the other hand, we can't say that they are exactly the same. We have to be careful making generalizations. That is true, because a generalization might be true, but it doesn't apply to any particular woman or man. Like if I were to say, on average, men have more upper body strength than women. That is true. But we probably all know a man that has very little upper body strength, and we all know a woman that has pretty good upper body strength. That doesn't take away from the averages, right? So let me give you a real personal example in the last few minutes. I think the women are much better at this. I think this is more intuitive for them. I also think that they get the better share of it. They're very intuitive. They're what we would call imminent. A woman is usually here in the moment. Men are not. We're all over the place. Is that true for everybody? No. Is it generally true? Yes. So I happen to be having a discussion. My cousin Johnny, God rest his soul, he was in hospice, so he was 2 days from dying, and me, his wife, and his stepson were there. His stepson had just graduated from Duquesne with both a master's degree in business and a law degree, a dual degree. How we got on talking about human sexuality, I have no idea. So we sat there talking about this and the differences, and he kept telling me, he thought, honestly, I was being stereotypical. You're just giving me stereotypes between men and women. I said, well, I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to say that there are differences, and generally speaking, these are the differences to be fine. Well, we went on like 5 or 10 minutes, and then it dawned on me. I said, whoa, stop. I said, this is a perfect example. I said, your father will most likely be dead tomorrow. Look where your mother is. She's at his side. He's unconscious, and she's holding his hand. What are we doing? We're arguing about some abstract notion of sexuality. I said, I can't picture 2 women doing that. I can't. You put 2 women in that room, they're both going to be by the side of that individual. You put 2 guys in that room, they're going to be talking about their golf game. Now, if that sounds sexist, it's been my experience, right? So what does that mean in the end? It means that the woman is much more intuitive. Some of this stuff, like when I do teach sexuality to adults, I see the women getting it much easier. The men will understand it, but the women see it intuitively, right? Those are my 2 cents.